Hello, my name is Cameron, and I am a Ratchet Clank fan. It's my favourite series of all time, and that's why it annoys me that the PS2 games, the originals, are only available nowadays by streaming the PS3 ports through PS Plus Premium. So what I thought I'd do is play each of them and let you know what they're like. I also want to raise awareness of these games. I still think they're some of the greatest platformer shooters of all time, and maybe, just maybe, I can convince you to give them a go. After all, the next game might not come out until around 2029, so it's not like you don't have plenty of time. Let's start with Ratchet & Clank 1. This is where it all began. I played it on my PS5, and like I said, it's the PS3 port, which released in 2012. The original PS2 version launched in 2002. Ratchet & Clank was developed by Insomniac Games, creators of Spyro the Dragon, and the DNA of that game can be found here more strongly than any other entry. The cutscenes have introductory text before each scene plays out, the animations are kind of slow and exaggerated, you meet many NPCs who try to squeeze you for cash, and the levels have multiple different paths with various collectibles to find. Very Spyro. Ratchet & Clank is the story of how a Lombax, Ratchet, and a defective robot, Clank, must work together to save the Solana galaxy from Chairman Drek, the leader of a race called the Blarg, who wants to create another home planet for his people by ripping chunks out of other inhabited planets. The thing that struck me right off the bat is how good this game still looks. The PS3 version runs at 720p, and while it may seem a bit soft up close, if you sit back a bit, it looks quite crisp. The colours are vibrant, and the character and enemy designs are incredibly creative. Now, one thing you have to keep in mind is that the game is running off PS3 server blades, so you will get the rare frame drop, but that happened on the disc as well, as far as I remember. Veldin is the first level, which teaches you how to move, jump, swing a wrench and use Ratchet's first weapon, the bomb glove. One thing you might notice is that there's no strafing, which means you can't move side to side while aiming and firing at a target in front of you. That was added in Ratchet & Clank 2 and remained as a staple of the series going forward, but here it doesn't exist until you get the thruster pack, which is a gadget that lets you float slightly above the ground. Trouble is, it's really slippery to control. I don't know why strafing doesn't exist here, because it does in Spyro Year of the Dragon when you play as Agent 9, but hey, it is what it is. Thankfully, the enemies are slow enough and take only 1 or 2 hits before being defeated, so you shouldn't have too much trouble. The game's first real level is Planet Novalis. You get to explore different pathways here, with each leading to a significant collectible item. Collectibles in Ratchet & Clank can be gold bolts, which have a secret use later I won't spoil, new gadgets, or infobots which unlock different planets. Each path is littered with destructible objects in the environment, crates that contain bulk currency, and enemies. But look at this view! No, not that one, this one. That's present on every planet. Insomniac really went the extra mile to make sure that each location felt real, especially with the use of flying traffic. The immersion is fantastic. Same goes for the cinematics and characters. There is so much charm here, and it makes the Solana galaxy feel as if it has such a rich history.
Has this ever happened to you? Hi, I'm Captain Quark, and believe me, there's nothing worse than staring down a Blargian snagglebeast from the inside and knowing your equipment isn't functioning properly. That's why I come to Al's Robo Shack for all my electronic needs. Al has been the exclusive repair shop for my super electro gadgets since I was knee-high to a sand mouse. If Al can't fix it, it's not broke. Right, Al? You said it, pal! So if you're fighting crime, or just fighting grime, come to Al's Robo Shack in Metropolis for all your robotic repairs. Al's Robo Shack, it's Quarktastic!
Do you know what this means?
Yeah, Captain Quark is really sold out.
No, it means Captain Quark is on Metropolis. We could tell him about this invasion.
If we had a ship.
What? A ship? What? You're not going to torture me? Well, as planetary chairman, I could arrange for you to borrow our courier ship.
Cool.
You can count on us, sir.
It's also funny as heck. This game has a great sense of humour, and I do think it holds up well today.
When I was competing, I would devour courses like that for breakfast.
Bet that's not all.
Well, mostly. I have to mention the music though. It's so unique, so catchy. A particular highlight is the theme of Metropolis on planet Kerwan, but the music on Novalis is also high up there. It really contributes to the atmosphere of an action-packed, funny sci-fi universe that easily could have been a cool Saturday morning cartoon. I mentioned immersion before, and would you believe there's not a single loading screen here? Much like Spyro, level transitions are masked by cool cutscenes, and here they feature Ratchet and Clank's ship zooming across the galaxy. I've always loved that. There are also playable Clank sections. You can order around little robots called Gadgetbots and get them to do his bidding, such as attacking bad guys and creating new paths. There are hoverboard races, plus a couple of starship dogfights. Awesome, right? But let's get into the specifics of the PS3 port now. Ratchet & Clank 1 fares a bit better than its sequels, but there are some issues here that Idle Minds, the port developers, never managed to iron out. First of all, this Gadgetron guy. He's so squashed, it's like an anvil has just fallen on his head. But then on the other hand, the weapon and gadget preview screens look like they've just been squeezed. Next, the soundtrack doesn't loop properly while playing. It's not a massive deal, but it can be noticeable. I also noticed that the breath meter when swimming doesn't fully disappear when you exit water, and it stays that way for the rest of the level. It also happens with a weapon called the suck cannon. This is due to the game being modified to playing widescreen instead of the original 4:3 aspect ratio, and it's quite distracting. Finally, I noticed that the sound effect of Clank's helipack gadget is a bit out of sync. These are all visual and sound blemishes and don't affect the gameplay, which is probably why they were left in, but just know that you're not playing a super clean version of the game. Now let's move on to Ratchet & Clank 2, Locked and Loaded, or if you're in the US, Ratchet & Clank Going Commando. I love that name. It released on the PS2 in 2003, but the PS3 port came out in 2012. What a stunning upgrade this is compared to the first game. The visuals, the sounds, the controls, everything just feels so much richer, tighter, more fluid. Ratchet & Clank Going Commando is set some time after the first game and has the two heroes being transported to another galaxy to hunt down a new villain called the Thief, who has stolen a secret prototype from Ratchet & Clank's new employers, Megacorp. The story is a bit all over the place, however I still think it's entertaining and the cinematics and characters are top notch, much like the first game. The Thief is also an interesting character with a certain trait that people still talk about to this day. If you're a Ratchet & Clank fan, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, please don't spoil it in the comments. One interesting thing about this game is how it starts you off playing as Ratchet without Clank. It takes a couple of planets before Clank comes back into the picture, and when he does, you get access to all of his gadgets, like the helipack and the thruster pack, that he'd received in the first game. A nice bit of continuity, I think, and the earlier planets are designed in a way that Ratchet can get around by himself. The Bogon Galaxy is where this game takes place, and it's seriously varied. There are so many planets to visit, with visuals and cool gimmicks that really elevate them above the planets in the first game. And what's this? A Mario Galaxy level, years before Mario Galaxy existed? This is why Insomniac is my favourite developer in gaming. You know how I said there were hoverboard racing and dogfighting sections in the last game? Here, there's hoverbike racing and space battles. You can customise your ship and upgrade it with better weapons, shields and boosters, which gives you a better chance of winning challenges for bolts. You can also upgrade your weapons in this game. Each weapon gains experience when used, and when that coloured bar fills up, a new weapon is born. It's like Pokemon, but with guns. And when you find a certain NPC called Slim Cognito, you can spend platinum bolts to apply weapon mods. So you could buy a shock mod for your heavy lancer, for example. Pretty awesome. You can also buy new suits of armor at different points in the game. The combat has had so much of an evolution, and it's great to see. Back on the subject of challenges, one massive thing this game introduced was gladiator combat. In 2 locations there are arenas you can enter to fight for bolts and gadgets. They're fun, replayable, and fit into the game's bigger focus on shooting. It would also have a massive influence on the 4th game in the series, but more on that later. And would you look at this, Clank sections return. This time he has access to a few new gadgetbots that can create different kinds of paths, like bridges. Nice. Let's look at how the PS3 port fares. Okay, look, I know Ratchet's helmet being way too big for his head isn't game breaking, but come on people. This is so distracting. The level transitions are back, similar to the first game, but in the PS2 version, the starfield background moves more dynamically. On the PS3 version, it's just static. The soundtrack throughout the game doesn't loop correctly, and on one planet, a Megacorp testing facility, there is a whole bunch of dialogue completely missing from a tour guide. That'll make more sense when you get there, but trust me, the PS2 version of that particular level is so much better. Next, look at this. In the original version, you wouldn't have been able to see Ratchet's static head, but because it's now in widescreen, there he is. Finally, these pre-rendered cutscenes that are supposed to play in 4x3, for some reason they're squashed, which makes absolutely no sense to me. Again, none of this affects the gameplay, but they are disappointing blemishes to one of the best games from the PS2 era. Now, it's time for my personal favourite of them all, Ratchet & Clank 3, or if you're in the US, Ratchet & Clank Up Your Arsenal. It released in 2004 on the PS2 and 2012 on the PS3. This time, Ratchet & Clank have seen on the news that Veldin has been invaded by a hostile race called the Tyrannoids, led by the infamous Dr. Nefarious. They make the journey back to the Solana Galaxy to put an end to Nefarious' schemes. I love this story so much, and that's because it leans fully into the idea that Ratchet and Clank are basically intergalactic superheroes. Dr. Nefarious is the old nemesis of Captain Quark, who was a character heavily involved in the first game, and you get a lot of background here on their relationship. There are so many characters that get involved, both new and returning, and it honestly feels like the Ratchet and Clank version of the Avengers. Okay, maybe that's a bit much, but it is cool. Dr. Nefarious himself is the best villain in the franchise, and it's not even close. He's hilarious, menacing, and he steals the show every time he appears. He also has a really sassy butler.
Robotic citizens of the Solana Galaxy, the hour of your liberation is at hand! Too long have we robots suffered under the bigotry, the stupidity, the squishiness and foul stench of organic life forms. Soon, all robots will bask in the liberty and equality of my benevolent, iron-fisted rule. And as for you filthy organic life forms, you can look forward to being disintegrated. That's all for now.
They're like evil robotic versions of Batman and Alfred. This is where Ratchet and Clank are forged into the heroes they were always destined to be, and I love it. Also, Clank is a movie star. He's so awesome. I love Clank. For the first time in the series, there is a main hub you can visit between levels. The Starship Phoenix has VR training, a weapons vendor, an armor vendor, a trophy room, and it's also where you'll play your vid comics, which I'll get to later. The gameplay here is even tighter than the second game. Everything just clicks. Insomniac really improved with each sequel, and this is no exception. The weapons are big, bombastic, and now they level up more than once. Only when they get to level 5 do they evolve into new tools of destruction, and there are some doozies here for sure. Up Your Arsenal is much more combat centric than previous games, but still has all the exploration and collectibles we've come to expect from the series. It's just that there are a lot more enemies. New to this game are what I'd call war zones, where you help out the Galactic Rangers with their fight against the Tyrannoids. There are multiple objectives you need to complete, one after another, until the Rangers emerge victorious. It really hammers home the idea that you're fighting against a galactic invasion force. The maps used for war zones were also used for multiplayer, which was a new addition to the series here. Unfortunately, there isn't any ship combat or racing. There were plans for racing sections, but they didn't have enough time to implement them. The game is already huge, to be fair. You do get to ride vehicles in war zones though, if you do need that itch scratched. If you're looking for a classic gladiator arena in the vein of the second game, there is a place called Annihilation Nation. But while it does have pure combat rounds, there are also obstacle courses, which I can best describe as a deadly remix of Ninja Warrior. It's fun stuff. I should mention that there are Clank sections as well, but this time he has a gun. A banana gun, which he can use to manipulate a monkey. Just go with it. Like I mentioned earlier, there are vid comics you obtain as part of the story. They're 2D platformers where you get to play as Captain Quark and find out more about his totally not exaggerated life.
Right!
There's a lot here. Some people find the increased focus on combat to be a bit of a detriment, and so they tend to prefer going Commando, but Up Your Arsenal was always my favourite as a kid, and it still is. But it's kind of like picking my favourite bar of chocolate. I'll do it, sure, but that doesn't mean I don't love plenty of other chocolate bars. Unfortunately, the PS3 version has, you guessed it, some visual and audio bugs. Ratchet's helmet is too big for his head, again, and the soundtrack has the usual looping issue. The squash 4x3 cutscenes are back, which you can really notice whenever something that's supposed to be round appears on screen, like Dr. Nefarious' portrait here in one of the opening cinematics. But the big one for me is the out of sync sound effects during level transitions. Listen to this. Does that sound right to you? It shouldn't, because the sounds are playing out of order to the visuals. It really ruins the immersion that these cutscenes are supposed to provide. Honestly, it feels like they add something new to the list of issues with each entry, and boy oh boy does that hit a crescendo with the next game. Ratchet Gladiator, or Ratchet Deadlocked if you're in the US, came out in 2005 on the PS2 and 2013 on the PS3. That's interesting. 1 year after the other games. What could possibly be the reason for... Oh my god, what is that thing? Yeah, let's get the PS3 issues out of the way because they're not great. The gameplay is fine, but the real-time cutscenes are so butchered that they're hard to watch. Look at this. Why are they jerking like that? What's going on with Ratchet's face? Why does Al have no freaking eyes? And why in the name of Captain Starshield does Ratchet have some cursed horrific face when he walks? This is by a country mile the worst PS3 port of the lot. And of course, both the sound issue with the level transitions and the squash 4x3 cutscenes are still here. It's a real shame that this game got the worst of it, because actually it's a super fun experience. Let's start with the story. Ratchet, Clank and Al are hanging out on their ship when they get abducted by an underground corporation that runs a gladiator show called Dread Zone. The premise of Dread Zone is that various heroes have been collected from all over the Solana galaxy, and they've been forced to fight to the death in combat zones across different planets. It's a surprisingly dark idea for a Ratchet and Clank game, but it's not called Ratchet and Clank this time, just Ratchet. That's because this game is all Lombax, baby. There are no Clank sections here at all. Our favourite robotic pal acts as the guy in the chair giving Ratchet advice during each mission. Al is a tinkerer who can upgrade Ratchet's combat bots back at the main hub. What are combat bots, you ask? These things. They float around Ratchet and help him fight and activate gadgets. They also have their own personalities, and it's cool to get to know them over the course of the game. This is a very different experience from the other PS2 games. There's no exploration, only combat. Each planet is divided into missions, and then there are optional challenges you can attempt if you feel like increasing your dread points. Dread points are required to unlock new areas, along with increasing your rank by progressing through the story. It's basically like the gladiator arenas from games 2 and 3, but expanded into a full-blown adventure. There is a more traditional gladiator arena as well, and it's probably the best in the series, which makes sense. The weapons aren't that original, but they're extremely powerful and make you feel like a walking nuke. They can be upgraded 99 times, yes, you heard me right, and you can apply overpowered weapon mods to make them tank the frame rate. It feels like the developers just wanted to unleash all heck on the PS2 before moving on to the PS3, and I can respect that. There are multiple vehicles here, all of which are awesome, and each level contains fun ideas that keep the game from becoming too monotonous. Ratchet Deadlocked may be a totally different game from its predecessors, but if you're looking for epic console-straining combat and a story about breaking free from the chains of oppression, this is for you. Just be aware that streaming the PS3 version means you're going to encounter all of those visual and audio bugs I mentioned before. So that's it. Those are all of the main PS2 Ratchet and Clank games available on PS4 and PS5. But let's talk about the streaming experience. How does it hold up? Well, at my new house on my PS5, the internet we have allows for download speeds of over 800 megabits per second and upload speeds of over 50 megabits per second. Sony recommends a minimum speed of 5 megabits per second download and 15 megabits for 1080p, but I can tell you right now that that might not cut it. At my old house, my internet was nowhere near as good as it is now, perhaps 40 megabits per second, and it did have the occasional stutter and connection drop, both through Wi-Fi and Ethernet cable. Ethernet cable was better overall, so I do recommend connecting to your console if possible, but just be aware. You also have to keep in mind that anyone else using the internet to stream content can cause congestion, and if you're downloading anything, stop. I've made that mistake a couple of times. It can be easy to start a download, forget about it, start streaming a game, and then wonder why the connection's rubbish. Ideally, you wouldn't have to stream these games, but as the PS3 is so stupidly hard to emulate that not even Sony can figure it out, this is your only official option. They could release the PS2 versions like they have with the Sly Cooper series and Jak and Daxter, and maybe they will one day. But as you can imagine, 800 megabits per second download speed is more than enough to stream this game and every other entry in the series with little to no lag. So if you do have internet speeds as high as mine, or even higher, then you should be set. But even then, there was a rare occasion where I saw tearing on the screen and slight stutter, but like I said, it was rare. But that's it. I hope you found this video enjoyable, and maybe you're even considering jumping in for the first time. That would make me very happy. More Ratchet and Clank fans, the better. Let me know in the comments. If you'd love to see more videos like this, please smash that like button and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for warping to the worlds of Ratchet and Clank with me, and I'll see you next time.